World. Meanwhile, viewers, shifting focus to other news coming in. US President Donald Trump's 50% tariffs on India has now taken effect from today, hitting exports and growth in the world's fourth largest economy. The tariffs come as Trump says he is penalizing India for purchasing Russian oil and weapons. Trump has stated that he warned India that without de-escalation, there would be no trade deals and massive tariffs. Listen into what the US president has said.
Just like India and Pakistan, we're going to end up in a nuclear war if I didn't stop them. You know, it's sort of strange. I saw they were fighting. Then I saw 7 jets were shot down. I said, that's not good. That's a lot of jets, you know. $150 million planes were shot down. A lot of them, 7, maybe more than that. They didn't even report the real number. And I'm talking to a very terrific man, Modi of India. And I say, what's going on with you in Pakistan? Then I'm talking to Pakistan on trade. I said, what's going on with you in India? And the hatred was tremendous. Now, this has been going on for a hell of a long time, like sometimes with different names for hundreds of years. But I said, what's going on? I said, I don't want to make a trade deal. No, we want to make a trade deal. I said, no, I don't want to make a trade deal with you. You're going to have a nuclear war. You guys are going to end up in a nuclear war. And that was very important to them. I said, call me back tomorrow, but we're not going to do any deals with you, or we're going to put tariffs on you that are so high. You were there, Howard, right? Yep. You're going to put tariffs on you that was so high, I don't give a damn. Your head's going to spin. You're not going to end up in a war. Within about 5 hours, it was done. It was done. Now, maybe it starts again. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'll stop it.
All right, there, of course, viewers, you've heard what Donald Trump has had to say. Meanwhile, in an earlier response, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi had promised tax cuts and a simplified 2-tier GST system in order to boost consumption and support small businesses. He also urged citizens and shop owners to promote Made in India products. Listen in.
रूस से भारत तेल खरीदता है, इसलिए इसके ऊपर 50% टैरिफ लगाते थे। अगर हमारी वस्तुओं के ऊपर 50% का टैक्स लगता है, तो नेचुरल सी बात है, वो जो टैक्स बढ़ेगा तो कस्टमर भी जानता है जो चीज़ सस्ती होगी उसको लेगा, ना कि वो ज़्यादा वैल्यू को ऑफर करेगा।
अब इसकी वजह से ये दिक्कत ये आ रही है कि अब जैसे लोगों के प्राइसेस बढ़ गए, कोई भी सिंगल कमोडिटी को देखने के लिए अब बड़ी दिक्कत ये हो जाती है। सिंगल कमोडिटी को देखने के लिए अब उसको भी सिंगल पे भी उसको 50% करना पड़ रहा है। अब पहले तो बल्क होता था तो फिर भी एक बार के लिए चलो ठीक है पूरा बल्क, अब सिंगल भी किसी को कुछ भी ऑर्डर करना था तो वो टैक्स उसमें इतना बढ़ जाता है कि वो आउट ऑफ द रीच हो जाता है पर्सन के उस।
All right, viewers, there you've heard some of the residents, some of the small business owners in India highlighting how they could be impacted by these tariffs. Joining us on the broadcast is Professor Madhav Nalapat. He's the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much, Professor Nalapat, for taking out time speaking to NewsX. My first question, what do you foresee to be the immediate impact on trade, India-US bilateral trade, as well as the American consumer as far as these 50% tariffs are concerned?
Look, it's going to have a dampening effect on India-US trade. Make no mistake about that. And the fact of the matter is that we have a trade surplus in the United States, but the reality of the situation is it's going to have a dampening effect for some time. But the government is now working very hard to dismantle earlier restrictions and to promote much more ease of compliance. And I'm very certain that they're not going to use the threat of the stick. I mean, especially a stick that can electrocute, that can send you to prison. Because the fact is that sticks don't work as well as carrots do, and sticks can be evaded. And so that's why they're ineffective usually, practically. So I think the Prime Minister is working very hard to ensure that India basically gets through this storm of tariffs, and at the end of it will be much better off than what it was previous to this. If you remember, there was economic crisis in 1991, and huge reforms came. There's a looming crisis of these tariffs in 2025, and I'm very certain 2025 itself is going to see major reforms by Prime Minister Modi.
Indeed, Professor Nalapat, you've spoken of reforms, and this is something that PM Modi has highlighted. He's spoken about GST reform, in particular, the goods and service tax, in order to provide cuts, in order to drive consumption as well. He's also given a very strong Buy in India message to all the consumers. Do you think now, with consumption driving up and the domestic economy being the thrust of India's GDP, the exact impact will not be as much as if we were mostly an export-oriented economy?
No, there's no doubt about that. India is frankly, exports are only a small part of the Indian gross national product, and it's heavily dependent on domestic consumption and domestic production, especially of food grains. That's why the Prime Minister cannot budge on food grains. Trump wants to dump surplus grain on India. He wants to dump surplus dairy products on India, and that will completely destroy the agriculture industry and the dairy industry. That's absolutely a no-go situation. So I would say that the reforms that Prime Minister, for example, simplifying GST, at present, if the minute you get an invoice, you are liable for GST. Now, you send, the point is that sometimes the invoice that you send to a buyer, let's say, I mean, that chap takes months to respond, but you have to pay your GST at one shot. And second, for example, a GST slab, once you cross for 1 rupee about 20 lakhs a year, then the entire 20 lakhs plus 1 rupee gets subjected to GST, which frankly is not a good idea. So I know that the Prime Minister will be paying attention to these matters, and he'll making it much more, compliance friendly. And if I may say so, that involves taking down some of the draconian powers, because in practice, what happens is there are only a handful of corrupt officials. The overwhelming majority are honest, but these corrupt officials then game the system and use this kind of a threat to try and extort money from business people, especially small traders, small business, medium business. And medium business and small business is the foundation on which big business rests. Big business should not in India be just a labeling system for foreign-made items. They should produce on their own. And you can do that with a thriving MSME and SME system. So in my view, the Trump tariffs are a blessing in disguise, and you're going to see major reforms, and these are going to lead to important structural changes where SMEs and MSMEs come, and finally they become world champions. So eventually you might see them landing up on US shores. And I think as far as Trump is concerned, I think frankly, the way he's going, I'm not sure it's going to last for very much longer, this kind of, at least this kind of direction, because he's going completely opposed to what he promised to the electorate, and completely opposed to the MAGA base. And you can't neglect the MAGA base. You can't neglect your promises to the electorate when you're the President of the United States.
Speaking of the Trump administration and Trump's ostensible reason, they've claimed that these tariffs are in response to New Delhi buying Russian oil as well as Russian weaponry. Now, what's interesting is that India, we've definitely not caused the war in Ukraine. We've in fact repeatedly called for a peaceful end through dialogue since day one. And what's also interesting is that when India is attacked from Pakistan, rather than condemning what Pakistan does, there is just stone cold silence and an attempt to equate India and Pakistan. And now America is trying to tell us who we do business with and how. Why is Trump doing this?
Look, the fact of the matter is America is not what it was 100 years ago when it started its rise, and it's certainly not what it was even 20 years ago. And India is not what it was either, what it was 100 years ago, which is a slave country. And yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, when it was still on the threshold of entering into really good development. Now we are reaching a stage of good development. We are the fastest growing major economy in the world. And I am very sure that the reforms that Prime Minister Modi will introduce will have double-digit growth. So as far as making sense of Trump is concerned, it's very difficult to make any sense out of it because he's doing all kinds of things that are really upsetting his base. And after some time, that reaction is going to come and there are going to be correctives on his action. But in between, I would like to say, India will go ahead with the reforms and those are going to be very beneficial for a generation to come, if not more.
All right, Professor Nalapat, I request you to stay on with us. There's more news that we're tracking.